The Vikings and Kevin O'Connell are getting slammed for naming Kyler Murray their starting quarterback over JJ McCarthy. Kevin O'Connell and the team are responding, but their response is only bringing even more backlash. Let's get into it. Kevin O'Connell called it 4 days before the preseason opener. No live snaps against another team, no extended look under game conditions. Just training camp reps and a decision. The Minnesota Vikings quarterback competition lasted just 2 weeks into training camp, and the Vikings named quarterback Kyler Murray their starter. Head coach Kevin O'Connell announced on Tuesday. Head coach Kevin O'Connell informed the team of his decision on Tuesday. This battle was expected to last into the preseason, but O'Connell called the contest 4 days before the Vikings are scheduled to take the field against the New York Giants. That timing is exactly what set fans off. PFN NFL analyst Jacob Infante called it pretty unusual to see a QB battle called off before the preseason even starts, adding he thinks it's the right move for the Vikings because they have a team ready to compete for a playoff spot, and Kyler is the more polished option. But not everyone bought the idea that this was ever a real competition in the first place. One fan put it bluntly, glad the coach declared this relatively early, so Murray could get all the first team reps possible in a new system. But the timing makes it seem like there was never a real competition. Here's where it gets loud. McCarthy fans, and there are a lot of them, given he was a first-round pick just 2 years ago, did not go quietly. One NFL commentator admitted he doesn't usually take victory laps at someone else's expense, but said he was enjoying watching so many Vikings fans just eat it about JJ McCarthy. How bad he is and how wrong so many Vikings fans were. He went further, describing how hard the fan base had defended McCarthy against critics, who thought the young quarterback simply wasn't good enough, and how that defense collapsed the moment the job went to the ghost of Kyler Murray. The backlash wasn't just about the QB decision itself. It stretched back weeks to comments both quarterbacks made about each other that fans picked apart in real time. When reporters asked Murray and McCarthy about their relationship during OTAs, the answers landed completely differently with the fan base. Murray said it had been great, that he could help McCarthy since he was the younger guy, that he'd played 7 years going on 8, and that both of them wanted what was best for the team. McCarthy, in contrast, said it was just like two guys in a classroom. That single line detonated online. One fan said flatly, JJ, the first player to make Kyler look like a mature person. Another wrote that Murray was clearly going to be QB1 in week 1 and didn't see it any other way, telling McCarthy to pay your dues, young fella. A third fan wasn't nearly as gentle, calling McCarthy a juvenile who should not be leading any franchise at QB. Not every voice piled on McCarthy though, and that split is part of what made this drag on for weeks. Instead of dying down after one news cycle, former Vikings linebacker Ben Lieber, now on Minnesota radio, pushed back hard on the pile-on. He said he didn't truly understand what the issue was, given all the noise on social media, arguing that one quarterback gave a political answer, and one gave an honest answer, and asking what fans actually wanted from athletes. Honesty or the political answer, he didn't stop there. Labour said if McCarthy had given an answer similar to Murray's, taking the high road, he would have gotten destroyed, and argued a big part of the fan base just wants to nitpick everything McCarthy says and does. Even a former NFL quarterback jumped into the pile, needling McCarthy for how he'd handled the moment. Ben DiNucci told McCarthy directly that this was the NFL, that this kind of attitude doesn't fly at the quarterback position, and that too many people are watching how you talk and act. Meanwhile, the site covering the team pointed out something that made the entire debate feel almost unfair to McCarthy from the start. He's a 23-year-old kid who lives under a microscope and has been embroiled in drama and high expectations since his arrival. So that's the shape of the backlash before the ink even dried on the QB1 decision. Fans furious at McCarthy for sounding cold. Other fans furious at Murray for sounding entitled, media picking sides, and a head coach who had to eventually step in front of a microphone and answer for all of it. And he did, repeatedly over the course of the summer, each time the noise got louder. To understand why fans reacted the way they did to Murray becoming QB1, you have to rewind past the announcement itself, back to when Murray was still a free agent. Nobody, fresh off a Cardinals release, nobody thought was surprising. Arizona released him despite having to eat $52.7 million in dead cap spread across this season and next. The exit came after a rough stretch of health and performance. With Murray struggling to stay on the field and not developing further, the writing was on the wall in Arizona. Last year he played only 5 games, leading the Cardinals to a 2-3 record. before a foot injury put him on season-ending IR, while Jacoby Brissett finished the year under center. When Minnesota scooped him up, it was a bargain by NFL quarterback standards. With the Cardinals still paying him more than $30 million this season, the Vikings signed him on the cheap on a one-year, $1.3 million deal. Murray's reaction to landing in Minnesota surprised a lot of people, who assumed he'd view it as a fall from grace. Speaking on a call the night the deal was announced, Murray told reporters he actually grew up a Vikings fan. He posted a single word to social media that Vikings fans latched onto immediately: "Skol." But the goodwill didn't last through the spring. Murray made comments about splitting first-team reps with McCarthy that a chunk of the fan base and national media read as arrogant. The comments went viral, with many analysts and fans finding it arrogant, as Murray explained that after 7 years in Arizona, working under 2 offensive systems, and getting all the reps, it was hard to feel behind, while learning a new offense with limited work, in his own words, laid out during a media session. That spring, he called splitting reps the toughest part, being already behind and not getting the reps you typically want while learning a new offense, especially after being used to being in control of everything in a system he was comfortable in. Fans didn't hear a veteran being candid, they heard a $35 million bust, complaining about a backup gig he hadn't even locked down yet. The site covering the team's day-to-day summed up the mood. Murray faced fan backlash after his comments about adjusting to Minnesota's offense during the QB battle. The replies were not gentle. One fan asked if the baby quarterback wasn't smart enough to figure it out, given a 7-year veteran allegedly good enough to be paid $36 million to go away, shouldn't have trouble picking up an offense, telling him to put the PlayStation controller down. Another pointed out the Cardinals hadn't made the playoffs in 5 years and that Murray got benched for a journeyman last season, adding he should be able to compete with a guy who's played 12 games total. A third fan tried to strike a more measured tone but still landed a jab. This wasn't what you want to hear from a leader. Since you don't air your frustrations publicly, you put those on yourself and praise your teammates and coaches instead, adding that people might be too bullish on Kyler. One more fan simply pointed out that if he'd done his job in Arizona, he wouldn't be splitting reps in Minnesota. That was the environment Kevin O'Connell was managing weeks before he ever had to name a starter. A locker room under a microscope, a fan base already choosing sides, and 2 quarterbacks whose every word was becoming a headline. It set the stage for exactly how loud things would get once the job was actually handed out. If there's one person who had to answer for this entire saga more than anyone else, it's Kevin O'Connell, and he didn't just respond once. He was pulled in front of cameras and asked to defend, explain, or downplay this quarterback situation on a near weekly basis throughout the summer. The first flashpoint actually came from McCarthy, not Murray. McCarthy generated headlines when he said sharing the roster with Murray felt like the same feeling when you're in high school and there's another person on the other side of the room. That line spread everywhere, and O'Connell was asked to weigh in almost immediately. He tried to shut it down calmly. The interpretation of those comments will be what they are. O'Connell said, adding that in the room day to day, the dialogue and interactions between the 2 quarterbacks had been very professional, and more than that, a positive room. He even credited backup Carson Wentz with helping set that tone. O'Connell admitted he didn't make much out of McCarthy's original comments, acknowledging there was some reaction to it. That's probably not the first time there's going to be a reaction to those guys answering questions about the situation. He said, framing it as simply part of what competition is all about, since there's no hiding anything. Then Murray's rep-splitting comments hit, and O'Connell had to do the exact same dance for the other quarterback. It was more about hearing the full quote, O'Connell said. I know what he was intending. It was very similar to conversations we've had privately and even as a group. It's a foundation to build off of. He tried to frame the entire competition as bigger than any one soundbite. He said there'd been great learning taking place, and that both quarterbacks knew there was a plan in place to make sure the decision made would be about what's best for the team, with a timeline built around getting the eventual starter ready before facing Green Bay. Radio and TV insiders noticed a pattern. Every time O'Connell got in front of a microphone, he seemed to be managing outside noise as much as he was managing his quarterback room. One outlet covering the day-by-day summarized his stance on the McCarthy criticism directly. The critique of McCarthy's responses was overblown, according to O'Connell. Betting markets, meanwhile, had already made up their mind long before O'Connell would say anything official. Murray was sitting as a -1,000 moneyline favourite to win the job, with McCarthy needing what amounted to a gridiron miracle, or a Murray injury to pull the upset. Murray had built a reputation as a quarterback who's simply tough to dethrone from the QB1 perch. By the time the actual QB1 announcement came, O'Connell had clearly rehearsed how he wanted to frame it. As fair, as thorough, and as final, after some dialogue in-house, and daily analysing the overall of where we are at right now. "We did name Kyler Murray our starting QB," he said. "From the outset of our off-season, we have been intentional and open about the goal of creating a competitive environment. I do think there's been improvement. I think there's been guys with positive feelings towards their own individual outlook on things, as well as our team's confidence in the position." He was also careful, almost overly careful, to protect McCarthy publicly. Even in the moment he was demoting him, "We'll still be getting JJ a lot of work, a lot of reps, because it's very important that his development and ongoing growth and arrow up that we feel very positively about continues," O'Connell said, adding, "Nothing changes as far as JJ being an incredibly important member of our quarterback room and our team." But behind that diplomatic language, the numbers told the real story of how the decision had actually gone down. Vikings leadership had reportedly grown infatuated with what Murray's talent could do for O'Connell's offense, with the coach saying up on the podium that Murray had demonstrated rhythm and timing, anticipation, and the ability to get through progressions in a way that avoids negative plays and sacks. Even though the Vikings had told fans and reporters the competition was even, Murray was getting the majority of the passing reps with the first team the whole time. One site tracking camp reps caught the numbers directly. Murray took all the reps with the first team offense, while McCarthy worked with the 2s and Wentz was with the 3s. By one count, Murray got 26 reps, McCarthy got 21, Wentz got 10, and Max Brosma got 5 during that padded session. While O'Connell fielded questions from the outside, the two quarterbacks at the center of it all had their own version of how the announcement landed, and their reactions ended up being just as telling as any of the coach speak. Murray, for his part, took a notably measured tone once the job was actually his. He didn't come out swinging, and he didn't take a victory lap. "I didn't expect to be handed the job or anything like that. I just expected to come here and compete. I'm very appreciative of how it was handled," Murray told reporters. He went further later that day, framing the moment with a sense of legacy rather than triumph. "I take this job with great pride," Murray added. "There's been a lot of great quarterback play here in the past, and I hope I continue to carry that tradition." He also praised how the organization ran the entire process, which stood in contrast to the tension that had defined the coverage all summer. Murray said he appreciated the way the Vikings handled the QB competition, calling the whole process great and pointing to full transparency, from O'Connell to him, to McCarthy, and to everybody in the room. And it wasn't just talk. On the very day the job became official, Murray backed it up on the practice field. On the day he was announced as the starting quarterback, Murray provided on-field evidence to support the decision, going out and having one of his best days of camp, completing 15 of 16 pass attempts. McCarthy's side of the story is where things get more complicated, and where a lot of the backlash conversation kept circling back. O'Connell had to specifically address whether McCarthy might push for a trade if he opened the season as the backup. That speculation followed comments McCarthy made that some interpreted as him being unhappy with the Murray signing, and O'Connell responded by framing it as simply part of what competition is all about, insisting there's no hiding anything. He added that it would come down to how the locker room reacted on the field. "It's going to be displayed on the field," O'Connell said, adding that teammates, coaching staff, and everyone in the building had to feel conviction about the direction the team was going, built through daily habits and improvement. Even as O'Connell tried to settle the noise, the reality on the ground for McCarthy was rough. The two were in the midst of a genuine quarterback battle for weeks, and Murray seemed to be in the lead, though his own struggles in one stretch of practice briefly clouded that. ESPN's Kevin Seifert, who tracked the competition daily, put it carefully at one point. Seifert noted Murray had a couple of tough practices against the Brian Flores defense, and while he didn't think McCarthy had done enough to overtake him, he also couldn't say Murray had simply run away with the job. That uncertainty is exactly why so many fans felt blindsided when the decision came down early. Before the call, national fans watching from outside Minnesota were already predicting the outcome and getting frustrated with how long it was taking. One prominent Vikings-focused account wrote, "The alarms are sounding. I'm feeling very optimistic this clown show of a competition ends this weekend," with a clear shift and/or statement from KOC declaring Kyler Murray QB1 publicly. Another fan on social media argued the outcome was never really in doubt. Kyler Murray is cut and dry the clear favourite to start week 1, and he should be, the fan wrote. And once the decision actually landed, the backup question became its own story. O'Connell confirmed exactly where McCarthy stood going forward. O'Connell said McCarthy is slotted in as the backup and he's ready to go, adding there were moments where Murray showed comfort in the scheme, including days with really high completion numbers, that demonstrated a good understanding of putting the ball in play with good timing. So where does all of this leave the Vikings heading into the season? The job is Murray's, that part is settled. But the ripple effects of how it went down and how the team handled the backlash are still playing out. Start with the roster question that's been hanging over everything since the ink dried on the decision. Murray being named the starting quarterback now raises the question of who the backup quarterback will actually be going forward. McCarthy's status as a trade chip has taken a hit in the process. It has repeatedly been suggested that McCarthy has little value as a tradable asset at this point. That reality has left some analysts wondering if the Vikings are quietly preparing for a much bigger shakeup than anyone expected this early in the season. It seems clear the Vikings made their real call back in March and were just leaving the door open for McCarthy in case he had a great camp. He didn't, and it looks like the team is moving on from the 10th pick after just 10 career starts. There's a financial layer to all of this too, and it's part of why fans keep bringing up the Murray decision as more than just a football call. Murray has been the heavy favourite to win the job from the moment. He signed a one-year, $1.3 million contract in March after his release by Arizona, which will still pay him $35.5 million. That's the strange twist fueling a lot of the online arguments. The Vikings are paying a fraction of Murray's actual value, while Arizona foots the rest of the bill. And it's part of why some fans see this less as a bold bet and more as a low-risk flyer that happened to pay off immediately. There's also the O'Connell accountability piece, which fans haven't let go of. This is now the 4th different Week 1 starting quarterback O'Connell has had since taking over in Minnesota. Murray will be O'Connell's 4th different Week 1 starting quarterback since 2023, going from Kirk Cousins in 2023 to Sam Darnold in 2024, to McCarthy and now Murray. Whether that pattern is a sign of instability or simply aggressive roster management is exactly the kind of debate that's kept this story alive on Vikings message boards well past the actual announcement. As for the team itself, the pieces around Murray are part of what convinced O'Connell to make the early call in the first place. Murray now has the backing of a Brian Flores run defense that finished 3rd in the NFL in total yards allowed and 7th in scoring defense last season. And if he can be an efficient distributor of the football, this Vikings team can return to the postseason. The receiving core and scheme fit into that same argument. Murray is now playing in one of the most fashionable offensive schemes in football, in O'Connell's Shanahan tree system, featuring under-center formations, zone blocking, and heavy doses of play action and motion, a playbook that could take some of the pre-snap burden off his plate. There's also a version of this story that Murray himself has lived before, and it's part of why some fans remain cautious about buying all the way in. Murray has had comeback narratives before that didn't hold. He won Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2019, made 2 Pro Bowls, and took Arizona to the postseason once, but his play dipped in recent years. He's missed 30 of a possible 68 games over the last 5 seasons. And his last winning season came back in 2021, finishing 38-48-1 with the Cardinals overall. One outlet summed up the cautious optimism plainly. It's possible Murray is rejuvenated by this change of scenery, since in Minnesota he finds multiple upgrades he simply didn't have in Arizona. And that's really where this whole saga sits right now. O'Connell made his call, defended it publicly more times than most coaches would want to. Murray backed it up in his first practice as the guy, and McCarthy is stuck holding a clipboard while trade rumors swirl quietly in the background. The backlash didn't stop the decision, and it hasn't gone away either. It's just moved from who should start to how long does McCarthy stick around. And that's a conversation Vikings fans are nowhere close to finishing.